All right, the Federal Reserve met yesterday and they made their announcement. It's been all over the news. They did the quarter point rate reduction that we all were expecting and anticipating. Has the market shifted dramatically? Have mortgage rates fallen dramatically? Does this change anything in your mental math about buying a house now or later? That's what we're going to cover in the show for you today. Welcome back to the Informed Homebuyer Podcast. I am your host, as always, Rich Curtis, and I have with me my co-host, Dave Miller. Morning, Dave.
Good morning, Rich. Thanks for having me.
So, all right, the Federal Reserve met. We kind of knew what they were going to do. They kind of did what we said they were going to do. How's that shake out in terms of where were we at in mortgage rates before? Where were we at right when they announced? Where are we at today? Do we see any movement? What has been the result of all of this big, salacious headlines about the Fed finally cutting rates for the first time in a little over a year?
Yeah, I think definitely good news for mortgage-backed securities and mortgage interest rates, Rich. And we kind of knew this quarter point announcement to the Fed fund rate coming yesterday that they announced. We knew that was coming, and in a minute here we'll show a bond chart that kind of shows how long we've known that was coming. That was already baked in. As far as interest rates go, I think it's we talk in windows of time here. We were sitting roughly, I would say 2.5 weeks ago, around the 6.5 mark, interest rates, maybe a slightly tick above that. And ever since we've known that the Fed was going to come out and there was a 90% certainty that they were going to, lower the Fed fund rates by that quarter point, we have gradually seen rates improving. So that quarter point, by the time we got to yesterday, when they announced that was already baked in to the mortgage interest rate. So interesting enough, I actually, had locked a loan yesterday, and, all buyers are a little bit different based on credit score and down payment, all that good stuff. But
so we're not officially quoting rates that you can get.
That is correct. Yes. Got to be very careful there. But, we're seeing rates, low sixes, 6 1/8, 6.125, for those that can't do 6 1/8, 6.125, for those that don't do certain math figures that are below 0.25% increments. And that's a really good number, Rich. And I think especially when you look back that we were, maybe when the same borrowers started looking for a house, let's say a month ago, they might have been closer to 6.75. That's a nice swing. And I think we get greedy in this business, or we always want the lower rate. We always want the next lower rate. As consumers, we want rates to keep going down. But I think if we enjoy where we're at right now a bit and realize that, we're a full point below that 7% mark we were not that long ago.
Yeah, I mean, when do you think the last time you locked a buyer at 6.125 was? How far back you think that was?
I'm going to say 2.5 years, 3, it's been a while. Like,
like sort of early to mid 2022, maybe.
Yeah. That sounds about right. When, I think, what's the term you use about something hitting the fan, the proverbial,
defecation hit the oscillation.
Yes. Yeah. That's when, once that happened, we've been really, I think we saw a small little tick, window for a week or two, somewhere in between, where rates kind of came down a little bit, but then they just spiked right back up. But it's been a long time coming. And I think we've all been asking for this. We've all been waiting for this. And whether you're in the business or not in the business, looking to buy a house, you have folks that, people that are looking to buy a house. This is a nice reprieve. And, it's not going to, change dramatically how much your affordability is. And I don't know, we talk about like purchasing power. So, that half a point different in interest rate, or, you might be looking at $150 to $250 in lower payment, or $50,000 to $75,000 in purchasing power.
Depending on the cost of the home. Like if you're looking around 500,000, you're probably around that 140, 150 mark. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. That's not nothing. Well, these days, that's what, one night out if you only have one drink with your wife.
Yeah. That's maybe if you split a drink.
Right. Yeah. Could you pour that margarita into 2 glasses for us, please? It's 2025.
Yes, exactly. And then, we're already anticipating, there's going to be 2 more Fed meetings this calendar year, and they're already kind of anticipating, and it's, that we're going to see another quarter point reduction each time. Now, keep in mind, there's going to be data that they're going to look at and analyze and make those determinations. But all indications at this point in time point to another half yet to go this year. Does that mean a half a point in interest rates? No. Some of that is even already baked in, that anticipation of those rate reductions.
Yeah,
So
because his language yesterday with the announcement pointed to the likelihood of continued drops, and the market is pricing in his language. They're future pricing in the direction he's saying they're going to go. So we won't see as much
yeah,
of a dramatic swing at the
right.
announcement as we will see based on the language and projection now. Is that fair to say?
That is very fair to say. I think you're spot on with that. And we always listen to the language, and obviously anything can change with the data. But the anticipation, and I would find it hard that the data would have to be really skewed for them to kind of sway based on this anticipation.
Or reverse course anyway. But
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
more likely that they would do a bigger cut than they would go back to a neutral stance or a raise
Yeah.
at this point.
I would say that's the case, but I certainly wouldn't hang my hat on a bigger cut. I think the
Yep.
MO here is to, two more meetings. Let's go in quarter point increments. Let's not bite off more than we can chew. Um, yeah.
Yeah, and there's a lot of noise too in the media about this whole thing, right? The president's been pushing for drop it to 1%, which would be, in my opinion, catastrophic for our economy if you did that. There are reasons they want that in Washington, but it wouldn't work out great for all of us here on the street. The committee, there was 12 voting members, and they were 11-1 for a quarter point reduction. There was one dissenting opinion that wanted a half a point reduction. So if those numbers will have to skew dramatically over to the next meeting for us to see them entertain a half point cut. So we're also basing our future predictions or direction on how the committee voted. They were relatively almost all in lockstep to do a moderate, reasonable quarter point reduction. There was only one person pushing for the half point, and if he'd have to drag a lot more people onto his team by the next meeting for us to see it start going faster. I think that's why Dave's saying I wouldn't hang my hat on a bigger one. Is that right, Dave?
That is very accurate, Rich. And, there's short-term and long-term projections. And, these uh, federal board members are already projecting out years down the road. And so,
Yeah.
some stats out there, if you were to say, okay, let's take a look at what their opinions are for 1 year out and 2 years out, it's certainly not, 11 out of 12 are on the same page about what we should do. There's anticipation. So that's a longer term project. And it's like anything, it's trying to, don't want to, it's like trying to guess what the weather is going to be,
Right.
2 months from now. You got to come
Mhm.
up with an anticipation, but it's certainly a lot easier to predict once you're a week or two out based on recent data, what that's going to look like. So typically we're, in a 90-day period with, seeing if where the Fed members are in alignment with one another in terms of what's going to happen at the next meeting.
Well, and they're dealing with a very dynamic environment right now. The fiscal policy coming out of Washington is still very, I guess, a friendly, favorable term would be dynamic.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, yep, yeah.
changing quickly and frequently, which isn't usually the case. Fiscal policy is usually a slow and measured situation, whether it's coming out of the Fed, it's always that way. But when it's coming out of Washington, it's usually that way. We still have trade deals up in the air. We still have the trade war going on. We have some geopolitical stuff going on, and even some domestic stuff going on that is making the economic data bounce around in weird ways. And so, in the same way that Dave and I always say that, like we've been doing this 21 years, and we always have to have a pretty big grain of salt with any predictions that we make. And I would say for me, at this point in my 21-year career, I am less confident in any prediction I make right now than I have been at any other point in my career. Because I mean, a number of times we've turned off the pod and picked up our phones and found out that someone said something in Washington, and the stock market raced and the bond market reacted, and everything we just said is off the table. That's happened multiple times over the
Yeah,
last several.
multiple times. And I've been doing this over 20 years. And there was a point in time, Rich, and shoot, I got to go back at least probably 8 to 10 years now. But there was a point in time where I really knew what rates were going to do, and even mortgage rates and cost to get that rate. I kind of could predict what they were going to do for weeks at a time. And
Yeah.
now, if you were to ask me the difference between today and tomorrow, it's just a lot of uncertainty. With the data that's coming out, and it's just really hard to predict. Like you said, someone could say something, or something can happen, whether it has to do with a trade deal, or a war sparking up somewhere, something that's just going to cause the market to swing one way or the other. So that's why I'm a big fan of a bird in the hand. We know what we have today. We're low sixes right now for the most part. Let's enjoy it, right? Like, hopefully it gets better, and at some point in
We don't
time,
know what tomorrow's going to bring.
yeah, and it sure is a lot better than we were when we were at 7 or over 7. So
Or it hit 8 for a little bit several years ago. That
yeah,
was insane.
yeah,
I had this great pediatrician when the kids were little, and he would, during cold season, he would look in their ears and he'd say, "Oh, they don't have an ear infection," and he would say that, that diagnosis is good until you hit the parking lot, right? Because kids'
right,
ear
okay.
infections come on so fast. And I feel like with financial projections, that's where we're at. This projection is good until you click off the show and go look at your phone and see what has happened while we've been talking for the last 20 minutes.
Yeah,
um,
100%.
but the trajectory, the overall trajectory right now, if we look at January to now, we're down roughly, and again, we can't quote exact rates,
Yeah.
your mileage may vary, but we're down about a half point overall since January. Is that fair to say, Dave? In
That
mortgage
is
interest
fair to
rates?
say, and it may make sense, Rich. We got a mortgage chart, a mortgage-backed security. Maybe we pull that up and
Yeah, let's
uh,
take a look at that.
yeah. And so what you're looking here is the 30-year mortgage-backed security, and we're going back from August. So I think that or July, late July. So you see a big green bar on August 4th. The bottom of that green bar is bad. That means rates are higher, and the higher we get, the better mortgage rates are going to get. So you can see since August 4th, fast forward to September 18th, we're over 101 on the right side on the bond market chart. So that August 4th number was high sixes, and you fast forward to where we're at today at 101, we're low sixes. Um, and you're looking at what we call floor. So that 101 number, you could see for the last 10 periods or 8 periods, we've been bouncing above 101 basis points on that chart, but we've also been capped at 101.5. So the 101's a floor, the 101.5 is a ceiling. If we break through either one of those, if we go down below 101 and it's more than for a day or so, it's likely that we'll see rates get worse. If we stay in this window, they're going to stay about the same. If we go above that 101.5, and we could stay there for a few days, and now that becomes our new floor, and then we'll get 102 will be our new ceiling. And so that's where we'll start to see, my guess is once we sit above that 101 or 0.5 or higher, that you're going to start to see, high 5 interest rates.
Yeah, and sometimes this stuff can be really confusing. This is a little bit of insider baseball here for sure, but we want to show you these things because when you look at the charts, the macro trends here, even as a layperson, you can pick up some things from this. And one of the things that I find is interesting is one of the points Dave and I keep trying to make is that these interest rate drops are baked in. So the news puts a lot of hype on the day the Fed makes an announcement. But for weeks or months before they do that, people have been saying what they think they're going to do. And they're actually usually pretty accurate as to what they're going to do. And the market already baked that in. So you see that sort of like 4 or 5 bar step up right before the far right side of the chart. That is
Yep.
where everybody sort of gained some confidence because they thought they're going to drop rates, right, Dave?
Yep, that is it. And that's where that bake-in number was. And I always get, pundits and folks saying, and even consumers saying, well, the Fed's coming out tomorrow to announce that, the new rate. Should we just wait to lock in?
It's like
It's already baked in.
that.
I've seen it go the other direction, probably more often than not. And in fact, I look at yesterday, we saw an improvement, and then it retreated again. So that's why 2 days ago you see a red bar. We were higher for a minute when you have that wick up higher. We got up towards 101.5, but that was short lived, and then we went back down and settled back down, and now we're bouncing in that just over 101.09 range.
Yeah, and if you're looking at home across the bottom of the chart, you'll see dates, and the last 3 dates, heading left to right, the last 3 are September the 8th, September the 15th, September the 18th, of course, today. And you can see that once we did those 4 or 5 teal step ups there, so that's was between September the 8th and September the 10th or so. It's been bouncing, as Dave said, in that 101 to 101.5 range all the way through the Fed announcement yesterday and through today. It's been staying in that same range essentially, which is showing that the market didn't respond to the Fed's announcement. They responded to the confidence level of what the Fed was going to do 2 weeks ago, not to what they said yesterday. The market pretty much didn't respond at all to what they said yesterday, at least this part. Now, the stock market did some weird crap, but
Yes.
this one, the mortgage-backed securities that we are concerned with for mortgage rates, didn't really respond.
Right. That's spot on. Spot on. And so this is what I look at all day, every day. And when you got a consumer that's out looking for a house and wanting to know, should we lock or should we float? We're paying attention. And this is where you also have to be really careful. You start looking today for a house, but you might not want to find one for 30 or 60 days. Sometimes it works in your favor, sometimes it doesn't. So that's why as a mortgage loan professional, I'm conservative. I typically quote your payment and your rate. I like to let people know, let's just base this if everything was a quarter point higher today than it actually is, because we don't know what's going to happen. Um, if I was to lock in today, that might be a different number, but let's base everything off this. So if, in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, you find the house you fall in love with, you write an offer and things are a quarter point off, that, you're already prepared for what that's going to look like.
It's also a reasonable part of the conversation to have too, because if you as a buyer, if Dave says today's rate's this, here's your payment, but we're going to base it on maybe a quarter point higher, here's your payment. And that quarter point higher payment makes a huge difference in your life or would change your decision to buy a house. That's a good red flag. We try to give you financial guardrails and ways to frame your thinking about purchasing a home on this show. And this is a great red flag. If the difference between the payment at this and the payment at a quarter point higher makes a significant difference in your monthly budget or in your life, that's time to pump the brakes on the whole idea and decide whether now is the right time for you to buy a house or not. Because if you're on that tight of a thin red line or a budget, homeownership may not be for you, or you may need to think about adjusting your budget down so that quarter point swing on the new budget for the house isn't such a dramatic impact on your life, because you're probably too close to the ragged edge if that makes that big of a difference for you.
Yeah, and using our numbers, Rich, at a $500,000 purchase price, and maybe 100,000 down, $400,000 loan amount, you're looking at for a quarter point difference, you're probably looking, let's just say 75 to 80 bucks a month. And I don't want to devalue 75 or 80 bucks a month. It could be a lot of money, especially over the long haul. But if you're looking at a $400,000 or $500,000 house, and 75 bucks a month, to your point, is going to change your mind, we might want to rethink what we're doing. So
yeah, if 75 bucks a month difference means you're buying groceries on credit cards, then you should reassess whether, and I don't mean that flippantly. There is real suffering going on in the country right now. There's people out of work. There are people who have seen a lot of wage stagnation over the last 40 to 50 years. Everybody's at a different point financially, and a lot of families are struggling. So we don't want to minimize that struggle. But if you're struggling that much, then it might not be a financially wise or safe decision. Again, this is not financial advice. You got to make your own choices. But as a way to frame your thinking, if $100 either way is a go, no go choice for you, then $500,000 purchases probably are something you should rethink right now. We wouldn't certainly feel great about putting you in a house if your tolerances are that tight.
yeah, yep, good point, Rich. And maybe now's the time too, is like, and I don't know what you're seeing, but there's, I think you just read a stat here earlier that there's projections that we're going to start seeing an increase in mortgage applications.
Yeah.
And that's is going to be direct correlation of interest rates being a little bit more favorable than they have been. That's all that really is. And people get a little more excited, and they've been waiting for rates to come down. And there's some folks that are not going to wait for a 4% front number rate, because just realistically, we got bigger problems if that happens.
Yeah. Well, that's another sort of the double-edged sword of the rate reductions we're seeing. We can get to that. But yeah, we're currently Q2 of 2025. We're up 6.3% year over year on mortgage applications, which is a statistically irrelevant number essentially, but it is going the right direction. It's going up, not down. Mortgage Bankers Association, which, take it with a grain of salt, because they're also wishing and hoping, they're projecting maybe a 28% increase year over year by the end of the year in mortgage originations. And certainly every March, every tiny bit we get lower on rate increases the likelihood that prediction will come true. So we are seeing that. but we still, half a point. Let's contextualize half a point. So we've seen a half a point over the course of the year on a
Yeah.
$500,000 house with 20% down. Half a point. What does that swing the payment for people?
160 bucks, $160 a month. It's
Yeah.
not
So
nothing, right?
yeah, it's not nothing, but it's also this is not the sort of rescue, the hand of God, the
Yeah,
affordability bailout we all sort of
right.
desperately want for the market as a whole. This hasn't
Yeah.
changed the game that much.
Right, and when you're talking to folks that maybe bought a house 10 years ago or have that low interest rate, I always look at the biggest factor, more importantly than mortgage interest rates changing, is purchasing price and loan amount. I mean,
Yeah.
you're talking a $100,000 loan amount is gonna change your payment like 700 bucks a month on average. I mean, so when we go, homes have appreciated quite a bit in the last 10 years. So if they've, appreciated, we'll just say $200,000 on average in that time period, you're talking $1,400 more a month in carrying costs if you finance all that. That's a big swing, So
Yeah,
the
so there's
difference.
a balance there between waiting so long that prices go up that they make a bigger impact than any reduction in rate could save for you.
Yeah, or, unfortunately, we're in a landscape where I feel like that trajectory of values has slowed down.
If not
Um,
started to decrease in some markets, which we're seeing.
Yes. Yeah, and I think that's super important because it gives the incomes time to catch up, right? Like
Yeah.
if home values keep accelerating and going up, faster as than inflation and faster than income goes up, the buyer pool just continuously shrinks and the affordability index goes way down. So it's kind of nice to see a reprieve right now. I don't know how long it's going to last. And, for us, maybe we hope it lasts, a fair amount of time so we can, get back to a balanced market.
Yeah, and I think the double-edged sword of this, Dave and I always, when we talk offline, preparing for these shows, we're always sort of like, be careful what you wish for. As a real estate professional or a mortgage professional, interest rate drops are good. And to clarify, if you're not a frequent viewer of the show or you don't understand exactly how this works, federal funds rate is not the mortgage interest rate. That is the short-term borrowing rate that where banks and governments can borrow money for. It has an effect on the mortgage interest rate, but it's not one to one. So the Fed dropped that quarter point. It didn't drop mortgage interest rates a quarter point. We might see in anticipation of the quarter point drop, we might see what, an eighth, Dave, or 16th drop in mortgage rates.
Yeah, that seems reasonable. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So, but the real reason for this rate drop, for this quarter point rate drop, as far as I can see in the financial data, is twofold. One, the inflation numbers weren't as bad as they thought they were going to continue to be in response to the tariffs. We're still there was a lot of front running of the tariffs that's still going on, and we have yet to see. We have predictions, anticipations, ideas of what the tariffs will do. The data isn't shaping out yet, so that allowed the Fed room to think about it. But really, it was the job numbers. Well, they
Yes.
revised the job numbers. We had added 1 million less jobs than we thought since January. The amount of job seekers is now larger than the amount of available jobs in the country. So joblessness is up, and we keep seeing more joblessness than the predictions. So we're beating the predictions in a negative way in that sense. And so as we look at the next Fed reduction and the next Fed reduction, because we are now anticipating probably 2 more quarter point reductions, so it's going to get better for mortgage interest rates, but it also is a sign that the economy is doing worse and that many of you may be worried about your employment more. And so we could see an eroding of buyer confidence along with an eroding of the economy that leads to these rate drops. And so there are competing factors here that we try to balance on the show. If you're watching over the next few months as we approach the next Fed announcement and we see more job numbers come out and they're bad, we're probably going to still see rate cuts, but that also is going to have an effect on your local market of a continued contraction of the buyer pool. Even though we're going to add some buyers because the rates came down, there's no rate that will make up for being afraid you're going to lose your job or having just lost your job and not being able to buy a house. So we do have some competing factors here. This won't be a one-to-one up and to the right for the real estate market kind of recovery cycle with the rates coming down. It's going to be a push-pull mixed bag like we've been seeing with everything else over the course of this year. Would you agree, Dave, or you got a different take on that?
Yeah, I agree with that take 100%. Very fair to say. And I think like anything is we're absorbing the data, we're looking back and when the data moves, or the numbers move accordingly with the data, then it's this pragmatic approach that the Federal Reserve is taking, which is good, because you just got to be cautious. You don't want any large swings one way or the other. Just slow and steady, I think, is ultimately going to win the race here. The other piece that we look at from an inventory level, and the one number that are building permits. Building permits are way down. And again, I don't want to get too deep into the weeds, but so there's a lot of new home builders have done some creative things to try to blow out their inventory levels, but they have not, the level of new permits for building new homes isn't at a rate that we really need to be, for supply and demand. So that's going to add a whole different level of pressure there.
Yeah, and there are sort of like four horsemen of the apocalypse for the new builder people, right? When I see these things, they're offering full freight commission to a buyer's agent. They're doing price reductions. They're offering lender incentives and price drops. When you see those four things coming out of builders, which are four things they hate doing, the new construction folks, that's a bad sign that they're not able to move inventory in the way they would like. And my inbox is filled with builders shooting me emails saying, "Hey, we're offering full commission, and we're having a party. Come on down and have some beers and check out our homes." So yeah, I think that is, and that also, and we have other podcasts on this. So like Dave said, not to get too into the weeds, but we are millions of units behind on supply. The reason we have this, one of the reasons, there's lots of reasons, it's complex, but one of the big reasons we have this affordability issue is because we have just a lack of inventory. We don't have enough houses. We have more people who want houses than we have houses to give them. So competition is high on the houses. So prices go up. The only way to fix that is, and especially with the lock-in effect, meaning we're going to still continue to see less residential resale easing of inventory, is to build more houses. So if the builders aren't moving inventory and they're backing off on initiating new permits, then we're going to continue to fall behind, and those millions of units we're already behind are going to get more. And so even as rates come down and prices march down a little bit because of market mechanics, we aren't likely to see the big price corrections that we want to see, because we'll still see a real low inventory situation. And that's what I mean by these things being complex. We'll bring more buyers to the table, but now the builders backed off because the economy is crapping out. And so we don't have enough houses for the new buyers. That keeps the pressure on, and then the prices stay the same or go up a little bit and don't decline. And so we don't get enough affordability out of interest rates because the prices are staying steady. And so we need more houses to come to market and lower interest rates to really get what we need for the vast majority of you. 15% or less Californians, and we're in California, can afford the median home price of just shy of 900,000 right now in the state. And that's an abysmally low number for affordability. And so we need, these rates coming down are great. We also need some more inventory. So we need the economy to do at least well enough that the builders feel like they can get out there and do some new build starts.
Yeah.
And
And I also think coinciding with that, Rich, is we talk again about the lock-in effect. These are folks that have very low interest rates that maybe dabbled with listing their home and then didn't get what they want, and they went away because they don't want to buy a new home at a 6.5% interest rate. But if we do see rates with that front number with a 5, I wouldn't be surprised if those folks now are willing, especially the folks that are looking to buy another home, are willing to list their property and willing to sell it. They've already, there's an, through that the acceptance that they're not selling their home at the top of the market anymore. That ship has sailed. So now, when the market is not dropping, super fast, it's just gradually coming down, they might be willing to sell their house at fair market value. And if to go buy another home with a interest rate with a 5 front number, we might see those inventory levels, those folks, come back to the market.
Yeah, I think that's a great point and probably a good place to wrap this. I can't say the exact number that makes those 2.5% people jump off the fence and move across country to be with their grandbabies and eat a new mortgage at 5.5 or 5.7. But I think of anything I can predict, the highest level of confidence I have is that number definitely has a 5 in the front number. Until we're seeing 5s in that front number, we're not going to see a significant amount of people who are affected by that lock-in effect of their 2.5% interest rates coming off. And I suspect it's closer to mid 5s, 5.5, before people really start saying, all right, that's good enough. I'll move again. And so to to your point, that the interest rates continuing to march down could get to a point where they then have a positive effect on the inventory crisis. We're not there yet. Mid 2026, end of 2026, possible.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, I agree. That would be good. I think it'd be good for everyone.
Yeah. All right, folks, we're going to wrap it there. I hope that gives you some perspective. The Fed did what we thought they would do. The interest rates didn't move a whole lot now, but we are down 0.5% from January overall. So that's a much better landscape than we were at. It's going the right direction. If you meet our 5 real estate fundamentals, and I'll link that video up here at the end of this, watch out. If you meet those fundamentals, these aren't bad interest rates to jump into the waters. If you don't meet those fundamentals, start working on them, call us. We can help you with that. Are we at the tipping point for you? Let us know in the comments down below. And while you're there, hit a like, hit subscribe. Is the low 6s, is that good enough for you to jump off the fence as a buyer? Or are you still hanging in waiting? That's a personal decision that's above our pay grade, but we'd love to hear what you think down in the comments down below. As always, you made it 30 minutes listening to 2 middle-aged dudes prattle on about real estate, which means you are a glutton for punishment, or you're a rock star who's deeply dedicated to your financial education. Either way, thanks for making it to the end with us. We'll see you on the next one. I'm Rich Curtis.
And I'm Dave Miller. Thanks, Rich.
Bye, everyone.